Hello, welcome to another V's Cards video. My name is mvcuic. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator in Australia, and in this video I'm going to show you 3 different ideas of wrapping up 3 different treats and giving them a tag. This video is perfect for a person who loves to decorate their treat gifts, or you might have your own stalls at craft fairs and want a crafty idea for presentation. Okay, let's get started. I've pre-cut my spare designer series paper so that I can still see the outside. There's a bit of a margin on both ends, and I am folding it really tightly, then adding some tear and tape to the end there, peeling it off and pressing down. You might notice on some of my videos I do like to recycle packaging and add that to my craft, and I'm doing that here today. I'm going to show you a trick to saving some money on cardstock by cutting your cardstock into small strips and then feeding it through the hole punch so that you don't end up with a whole lot of scrap cardstock that ends up in the bin. I'm chopping up long strips of soft suede cardstock so that it can cover the width of the bended stalk without having too much cardstock waste. Now it's time to adhere the parts of the cherry onto the tag, and I do this using multi-purpose liquid glue except for one of the leaves, which I use a dimensional to pop up. I find my silicone craft mat to be really handy, especially when I'm adhering with liquid glue and using small strips of cardstock. That way I'm keeping my craft area nice and clean and stick free. I'm tying a bow using my gold Simply Elegant trim, and then I'm going to show you a quick hack on using mini glue dots so that people can't see evidence of it underneath a thin bow. I'm manipulating it using my Take Your Pick tool by stretching it, and I do end up using my fingers. Try to avoid using your fingers because it does lose a bit of its stickiness, to make a straight line and then covering it up with the bow. I'm going to heat emboss a sentiment onto the cherry, and you've seen me do this before in my previous videos where I'm prepping the surface first, then stamping using Versamark, adding the white embossing powder, brushing off any excess. I do make a mistake and have to reload some of that on. And then I'm going to turn on my heat tool, heat it up first, make sure it's on the second level, and then watch the embossing powder melt. Not sure if the camera's going to pick up on that. I decided I was going to cover the recycle part of the tag by adhering basic white cardstock, so I'm cutting that out using my die cut machine and the same tag die, and I'm going to adhere it back to back so that I've got positive sides on the front and the back, and somewhere for the giver to write a message to the recipient. I'm using the white crinkled seam binding ribbon, and I'll tie that around a couple of times and end it with a bow. I'm now up to treat number 2, and I'm using the Hippiest Hippo stamp set and dies from the celebration promotion. So these are freebie items. The celebration promotion ends at the end of August, so it's not too late to stock up on your crafty items and get that stamp set and the die set or punch that you've been wanting to for a while now, because you have a selection of freebies to choose from. I'm going to mount the stamp onto a clear block, and then I'm going to show you step by step how to stamp using red rubber stamps, and I'll give you some tips and tricks along the way. Step 1, clear workspace to ensure that ink pad is resting on a level surface. Step 2, pat down on ink pad as though it was kissing the ink pad. Pat, pat, pat. Step 3, before stamping, check to ensure that all parts of the stamp image is inked up. Step 4, press down on cardstock and count 1, 2, 3, then release. Make sure that you apply even pressure. Don't just press down on one part of the stamp. And most certainly do not rock the stamp. Here's an example of what not to do, and I'll show the effects of what happens when you rock the stamp. First, this is patting, and that's what you want to do. And now I'm going to show you the rocking motion you shouldn't be doing, because when you do that, you're actually covering parts of the stamp that you don't want to, the edges, and it does create a halo on your card or tag that you're stamping. I hope the camera picked up on the dark line that's right on the edge of that stamp, and also on the acrylic block you can see a bit of a black mess. Now if I am rocking, I'm going to create that halo effect, which I don't really want. It's going to make some messy stamping, so you want to avoid that where possible. You could also get really messy inky fingers if you're rocking, so try to avoid that. I want to keep the colouring really simple, and the best way to do that is to not work on basic white but a shade or colour instead. I'm using crumb cake. I'm going to add some real red on for the rose or flower, and then I'm going to use some skin tones for some parts of the hippo. I'm not going to colour in him entirely, and I'm going to start off with a light colour because I don't want to make a mistake. And you can go darker if you need to, but you won't really be able to do the reverse. I'm using Petal Pink stamping blends, and I'm also going to use the white chalk marker for his eye. There it is, really simple colouring done very quickly. Now I'm going to die cut the shape of the hippo using the hippo dies, which is also a celebration freebie. You know how sometimes the die moves out of place while you're using the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine? Well, here's a tip for you. Use some washi tape. First, let's stick the washi tape on my skin. That way it takes some of the stickiness off, but it's still enough to hold everything in place. If the tape is too sticky, you're at risk of peeling off some of that cardstock surface, so you want to avoid that. Next up, I'm going to adhere the hippo using 2 dimensionals so that it pops up a bit on the tag, and then I'm going to add brushed metallic dots. I chose gold because I've got some gold in the designer series paper, so I wanted to match. Speaking of paper, I'm sorry, some of my papers I'm using today are actually retired. Have a look at your stash to see what would work for each chocolate bar that you're wrapping. You'll be surprised what works. I did experiment and I've tried lots of different designer series paper, and for some reason the gold and white really worked well, so I went with that. Finally, we're up to our last treat. For this treat, I'm actually going to unwrap the wrapping, take off the top part and keep the foil, and then just wrap it around with designer series paper. For this treat, I'm using the Rings of Love designer series paper. This is a celebration freebie, but only while stocks last. I'm cutting my paper to measure 4 inches across and 5 inches down. Essentially, I'm making 2 folds, one at the top, which is a smaller flap, and then one at the bottom, which should cover but not go over onto the side. I'm pressing down with my thumb, and I'm going to use some tear and tape to seal everything together. Now, to complete the decoration of the treat, I'm going to make a label. First up, I'm going to stamp a cute little fishy, and it happens to coordinate perfectly with a punch. You can purchase the stamp set and the punch together as a bundle to receive 10% discount. Remember the tips I gave you earlier about using the punch? You can feed through from the side. Using strips of the cardstock is going to save you on the paper, and you'll have less scrap paper. You can also feed it through the top and use the side as a handle. So the cardstock strip is going to be a little bit bigger in height than the actual image that you stamp. And here's what not to do to save on wasted cardstock. I've already pre-punched a label shape. I'm stamping a background and a sentiment for the label, and then I'm going to adhere the fish onto the label. The stamp set I used is retired, but I'm suggesting some current ones on the left there, so take a look at that. Also explore the website. I'm sure you'll find some more lovely stamp sets that you could use. I'd go for something that's small and one line, so they've got room to adhere the fish underneath it. This brings us to the end of another of these cards video. Thank you so much for watching. Please take a moment to like, subscribe and share. See you in the next video. Bye.